It's a very different race. I think the press has figured out that this time the outcome's going to be different. I think that's what they believe in. So yeah, on the day that I announced, I had interviews with the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Times, as well as all the networks. I did 3 different Fox TV shows, so it's been a lot of interest. Well, let me assure you, I wasn't waiting around to do this. I had no intention of running again. I've been running the Club for Growth for the last a little over 4 years, and I'm just loving it. I think it's a great organization. You know what the Club for Growth is about, dedicated to promoting economic freedom and prosperity through limited government, which is the only way people have ever achieved prosperity. So that's been great fun. It's a great organization. There's thousands of members, a great staff. Everything was great about it. And then all of a sudden, I've seen our federal government do things that I never thought was possible. This lurch to the left, this serial bailouts of failing companies, which is just outrageous, it's unfair, and it's terrible policy. Spending on a scale that I don't think I could have imagined. This awful stimulus bill, for instance, nearly $1 trillion of money we don't have, buying things we don't need, saddling our kids with debt they can't afford. It's just staggering to me. And when Senator Specter voted for all these things, and he decided to actively help in this lurch to the left, I think there's a conscious effort on the part of the administration to turn America into a European-style welfare state. And I think I want to stop that. I want to stand in front of that train and try to halt it and actually turn things around.
Back during TARP 1, which was the beginning of October and September of last year, when the Bush administration was still in control,
right.
What position did you take as president of the Club for Growth on that decision to bail out?
I actually came to Pittsburgh on, it was a Monday morning after they had announced their plan late in the week, the previous week. And I gave a speech where I personally, and acting as president of the Club for Growth, I said this is a big mistake. We should not be going down this road. And I gave my reasons, and I still believe they were right. You know, if you remember at the time, Secretary Paulson and President Bush were adamant that they absolutely had to have their bill. They had to have it immediately. It was going to be the end of the world if they didn't get it. And of course, it was $750 billion to buy toxic assets. Well, after enough arm twisting, they got it through Congress, and then they did nothing. They didn't buy it. To this day, they haven't bought a single toxic asset. After several weeks, they announced they've given up on that plan after all. I mean, it showed how ridiculous and poorly conceived this idea. I shouldn't say ridiculous, that's pretty harsh. And I don't mean to suggest that these guys didn't have every good intention. I think Secretary Paulson did, Chairman Bernanke certainly did. But I think it was very badly flawed policy, and I said so at the time.
How do you make things like the economy, like supply side economics, those sort of heady ways of solving
abstract ideas?
Right. How do you sell that to someone who's not Republican? It's easier for you to sell to someone that's conservative. How do you sell it to the guy that's in the union who's frustrated, but stand back and says this is too conservative or this is anti-union or whatever?
You know what the definition of economics is? That's when someone explains to you something you've known your whole life in a language you don't understand. So rule number 1 is you don't talk economic ease or whatever that is. I think average voters don't get nearly as much credit as they should. They're a lot smarter than a lot of pundits seem to think. And there are some fundamental ideas that people totally get, and you don't need a degree in economics to understand. For instance, part of the problem that we're in today arose because of too much borrowing and too much spending. And so the idea that the government will massively borrow more and spend it, that's going to work, Democrats, independents, Republicans, everybody understands at some level that's a very, very dubious proposition. That's going to come home to roost for this administration. Second simple idea that people get, if there's a business that's failing, it's not right to force taxpayers to prop it up with their money, force them to be involuntary investors, force them to bail out a company that's failing. Not only is it unfair to the taxpayers forced to do this, but it's bad for the economy, and people understand. There are lots of viable businesses, and if you're going to starve them of capital because you're putting it into a failing business, how can that be good for the economy? So I think people understand that. I really do. I think people of all political persuasions understand that. And I think my message of getting away from this approach of serial bailouts, massive spending, staggering debt, I think that's common sense, and I think it's going to resonate across party lines.
Final question. Top reasons for running for Senate.
Number one, by far, have you heard how good the jelly beans are in the Senate cafeteria? I mean, they are awesome. So, that's...